So hello everyone, welcome to this webinar dedicated to discovering Ringover's call statistics. And today we'll be looking at how to monitor call statistics on a daily basis. So my name is Carl, and today myself and my colleague Aurélie are actually part of the Ringover customer success team. And this webinar is part of a project that we've actually started running for a few months now. And as a CSM, our day-to-day mission as customer success managers are to follow up with our customers, with you, so that you can be fully satisfied with Ringover. And we are here to support you every day so that you can achieve your goals thanks to our solution. So today we meet for an exclusive webinar dedicated to statistics. This call is recorded, so you will have the replay at the end of the webinar. So today's agenda, so we are going to look at an overview of the statistics. Then we'll take a look at how to monitor statistics. Then we will have a focus on the statistics through an AVR. And last but not least, we are going to see how can we actually make statistics speak for themselves. But before we begin, we actually have a poll for all of you. And we are going to start with how often do you actually monitor your statistics. So please feel free to answer to the poll as it shows up on your screen. So how often do you monitor statistics? Is it every day, once a week, once a month? Okay, so we have 2 people who answered every day, 2 people once a week, and 1 person once a month. Perfect. Thank you. So before we begin, we are going to actually have a look at why do you measure your team's effectiveness. So we've actually thought about 3 big parts here. The first one is the operational team. So we actually need to check the level of efficiency of each member of a staff within various departments to ensure that, for example, your company, your call center, or your platform is up and running, and that is actually based on your performance indicators. The second one is actually the production team. So it's actually in your interest for your call center to be as productive as possible. The more efficient your team work, the more consistent your customers and profits will be. And that actually means that and comes from monitoring your agent's performance. And then you have the customer's experience, which is a smooth customer journey. So a customer actually appreciate a smooth customer journey. And so by tracking someone's performance, it's actually a great way to to have your agents involved within the KPIs because they will be more motivated, and it will then lead to a good quality customer experience. So how do you actually measure your team's performance? We've actually thought of a few indicators that you can implement within your team. The first one, for example, would be the pickup rate, so the SLA, the service level agreement, which we'll see in a few minutes. The missed call rate, then you would have the average call duration versus the industry standards. Because, for example, if you work in the fashion industry or in the insurance industry, your KPIs won't be the same. For example, the pickup rate or the average call duration, for example. Then you have the speed at which the agents would answer your calls. And then one indicator that we've also thought of is the average waiting time before a customer is being put through to an agent. So we provide you with a few indicators, but of course, these indicators as subject to change. So if you need or have any indicators that are not covered, don't hesitate to email our team at support@ringover.com so that we can actually implement those for you. So we are now going to move on with the demo. So first of all, to access Ringover's dashboard, you would need to type dashboard.ringover.com and you will be prompted to this page. So once you get to this page here, so first of all, in the activity page here, because this is actually a test environment that we have, but the way that you would look at it is that on the activity page, you would have the real-time activity. Once the call is completed, it is actually logged into the logs page. And from the logs page, it will be consolidated into the statistic part section according, of course, to your criteria. So by default here, the statistics would be the last 15 days. And just bear with me one moment. And I'm actually going to log in through our own dashboard. If you could just give me a moment. And here, if I go to the calls analytics and I reset my filters, just give me a moment while I log in. Okay. Call analytics. Sorry, just give me a moment. Let me try again. Okay, just give me a moment. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm actually going to do it from Ringover's dashboard, if you allow me, so this will be better for your experience. So, as I said, here you would have the activity, and let me put it into English. So here you would have the activity. Then you would have the call logs, and here you would have the call statistics. From the call statistics, by default, it would be actually the past 15 days. So you would have it here, the past 15 days. You can click here to actually edit the filters. So here you have several options that are available to you. So first of all, you would have all the calls. If you want to see all the calls that you have within your company, you would have inbound, missed, calls that went to voicemail, outgoing calls. Here you would have, of course, the date. So from the date that you want to start to the end. And here you have some shortcuts. The shortcuts, for example, if you want to do yesterday, the past 15 days, last week, the last 15 weeks, and so on. Just so you know, because we are submitted to the European GDPR, so that Ringover allows you actually to go back to up to the past year. If you want the calls that are, for example, from the past 2 years, you would actually need to have one of our integrations, for example, to have the calls logged after that, or you can use our APIs. Here, actually, you would also have the filters. So for example, let's say I want to have my only inbound calls from the past 15 days. You actually have at your disposal here the filters. So for example, the filters here, you can just click here and type call webinar, press enter, and your filters would be saved. So this actually means that once you log in, you won't need actually to go all the way through having to put all your filters again, because it would be saved here. Then you would have here the markers as well. So for example, on your desktop app or your web app, if you need to tag some calls through markers or stars, the user would actually be able to start the call directly from the web app. And as an admin, as a supervisor, you can actually just click here, for example, and you will be able to retrieve the call straight away once you click on search. Then you actually have here some filters at your disposals. So for example, today I want to analyze the activity of search or search team. So again, you will have the filters here to apply. So you can click here, for example, so on personalize, and then you can select a specific AVR, which we will see in a few moments. You can select over a group or over a user. And again, here you can filter through all the calls, only calls that are coming in and from an AVR, direct lines for the users, or you can personalize. And then once you have done all of this, you can actually choose to include or exclude certain types of calls. So for example, if I want to know about my missed calls, do I want to take into account internal calls? So calls that are made between one user to another user within the same company. If it's yes, then you can leave it as it is, or you can choose exclude. You can move the button here to include, or just click here to remove the filter. Again, do I want to take into account the calls that are lasting less than 10 seconds, since basically they didn't ring at any agents? Or even, for example, calls that are outside business hours. Do I need to include that for my metrics? So again, this would really depend on your use case, but you have many options. So you would have the calls that are over 3,600 seconds, calls that have been responded through a survey. So of course, this only works with an IVR. You would have calls that are that have conversations recorded. So this is actually a new feature that we have, that you can include calls that include conversations. You can also choose to include or exclude calls where no keypad options were selected. Again, you can choose to include, for example, outbound calls, so outgoing calls. Or you can also choose to include or exclude users that were not available within the call flow. And here you also have the ability to include or exclude outgoing calls that have been answered by a machine. And last but not least, this is also a new feature that we have implemented for you, but you have the ability to include or exclude calls that were with no voicemail. So Ringover gives you actually a lot of options, but of course it is depending on your objectives and customer strategy. And again, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask them over the chat, as Aurélie is here to answer your questions as well while I present. Then moving on, you actually have the transfer management. So here, based on your strategy, we have several use cases. For example, if I call, let's say, our support team, but the person, the agent, doesn't have the answer and wants the call to be transferred to a technical agent, do I want the call to be counted as multiple calls, or do I actually want the call to be counted as a single call? If so, do I want the two calls that were made, the one that I called and then the call that been transferred, to be just counted as a simple call that was transferred? Or for my statistics, do I want the first agent that picked up the call, do I want that call to be counted to that agent? Or do I want the call to be counted to the last agent who actually answered the call? So here again, Ringover gives you a lot of options that you can choose from. And then you actually would be able to actually have our tags, the tags here. So the tags would actually allow you to qualify your call. For example, if I have an inbound call, and that inbound call, for example, for support is about a technical issue, let's say, then I will be able to tag the call and look up for the call that is directly here, and I can click here. And then if I do search, then I would have all the data that would be available. Let me actually go back. call analytics, and that would have all the calls, for example, that were for a callback. But of course, there were no data here on this here. Moving on here, so how does actually a call statistic look like? So here, so for example, for today, you would have here the service level. So the service level is actually your pickup rate. So SLA, so calls that are been well handled. So basically, if you have a good SLA, so a lot of inbound calls, and you pick the calls, then you would have the percentage here. Here you have the button with processed calls. So what is a processed calls? The processed calls is actually, so once we actually call back a customer, or a customer calls us back, then you can actually see that the call has been processed. So the higher the percentage rate is for the processed calls, and here, so without the processed calls, and with the processed calls, the closer both percentages are, it means that the higher the handling rate are together. So the higher, for example, for a customer service department, the higher the two rates are, and the closer they are, this means that you are actually very close to your inbound, to your pickup rates here. Then here you'd have the total calls, so outgoing calls, and then you have inbound calls, so answered and missed. You would have the duration here, so for example, for today. Then you would have the waiting time here, and then you would have the average communication duration here for inbound, and average communication duration for outbound. And of course, here you would have the maximum for today. So for example, it was 22 minutes on average. Then here you actually have the call processing status. So for example, so what is a call that has been processed? And if you want, we can actually have a look here at the edit filters. And if you filter here on missed calls, you would have the ability to see that a call is being processed or in processed. So what is it? So basically, a call that is being unprocessed is actually a missed call. So how do you actually process that call? Basically, that call has been processed if the person, so the person who has had the missed call actually calls back the person from the number where the missed call was, and the person is actually calling picks up, then the call is processed. Or if the person who called you and you had the missed call calls you back, and you pick up, and that the agent picks up, then the call is processed. But there are actually other ways where you can actually process a missed call. Either, for example, you chose a callback. So a callback, for example, from another Ringover line or from an external phone number, or you actually called the person, or you actually talked with the person through SMS, by email, or you simply choose to ignore that missed call. For example, a spam call, as an example. And here, then you would have the call processing status. So here, the disparity that you would have, so you would have, for example, here, 95 missed call. And here you have 81 calls that were missed. So why do you have that disparity? So for example, here, the discrepancy that you would have is that if I have 5 missed calls from the same number, but if this person, this number calls me back, or I call back that number and that person picks up, the 5 missed calls would be counted only as 1. So that is why here you can have actually that discrepancy. But also, the discrepancy that you can have here would be due to internal calls. That is why it is quite important to exclude here internal Ringover calls. And if I exclude it, then you can see that our missed calls went up to 21. So it's important, based on the filter that you apply, to get the right information. And then the discrepancy can also come from unknown number. Since unknown numbers, technically you can't call it back, since the number is been masked and you can't call back that number. And for your missed calls, so you have the ability, so the missed calls that you can check would be, so on your IVR, so missed calls that are coming from an IVR, the missed calls that comes from a group. So here, if you filter through a group, you would have missed calls directly as well on the user's direct line and on the AVR. And the missed calls on the users are actually the missed calls that are actually coming directly on the user's direct line. And then here, you can actually have the average processing time. So the average processing time here is an average. So this means that if you look for the day of today, missed calls have been either called back or the customer called us back and it's been processed within 16 minutes. But it's an average. If I go over today and let's say I choose the last 15 days and I click on search, then here you can see you would have 25 hours. Why? Because Ringover actually takes into account the whole day, the whole 25 hours. That is why over today or yesterday, you would have an average. And then here, of course, you would have the processed calls by channel. So you can see that, for example, here, these were just calls, all the calls that were called back via Ringover. And here by SMS, and some were chosen to be ignored. Then here you would have the history. So the history is actually an interval, and it's actually an evolution over time. For example, here, if I choose all my total calls over the past 15 days, and I choose a bar chart, for example, I would have a bar chart of all my missed calls. But of course, here, I have filters with my missed calls. But if I remove the filter here and I choose, for example, here, let's say I'm going to choose, and let me actually refresh my filters, and I'm going to click on search. And here, if I choose here, total calls. So here you would actually have an evolution of the calls in terms of inbound, outbound, and missed calls. And this actually really works when you want to see an evolution over time. So for example, over the past week, we would have the exact duration. At the end, we will have the average. Then you would actually have the heat map. The heat map here actually gives you a lot of tools that you can use on your day-to-day basis, on day-to-day work, because for example, if I want, I can filter with total calls, but I can also filter with incoming calls, answered calls. So answered calls are inbound calls that are answered. If you choose outbound, if you choose here, for example, outgoing calls, you won't be able to see if a call was actually picked up by a person or a voice machine. Why? Because the call is connected and because it has been picked up, whether by a person or a voice machine. One use case that you can do here, if you want to distinguish both, is that you can use our tags, which are available on our business and advanced feature plan. And one feature that we've actually enabled here is that the unique color. So for example, the unique color is actually a tool that allows you to see, for example, if I have 5 missed calls from the same number, it would only take into account 1. So here you would have the unique color based on the day. One thing that I would like to add as well, if you select missed call, for example, because I've chosen 15 days. So here it would be an average. So over a week, it's an average. But let's say I'm going to choose here this week. So on my filters, I'm going to apply this week and I'm going to click on search. So here you would actually have the real, for example, percentage of missed call. So for example, let's say between 10 to 11, there were 46 missed calls. So within your business, you can actually check if were there a lot of users available, were they not available. So here, based on use case, you can actually add more users, or maybe if you have meetings and you can see that there's a lot of missed calls, then maybe move your meetings to another time or another date, so you can pick up inbound calls. Again, don't hesitate to ask any questions over the chat if you have any. Then we are going to move on actually to the leaderboard. So the leaderboard actually ranks users based on their performance. So you can, again, select with total calls, inbound calls, missed calls, answered, so incoming calls that were answered, and outgoing calls, both incoming and outgoing calls, just to name a few, the duration, and here the unique caller. So if you click here, you would actually have the number of time a number has actually called you. And then, if again, I choose all the total calls, you can actually filter with the data here, and you can filter as well through the average communication duration. I'm going to move on now to another part that we actually have. So if I edit my filters and I click here on personalize, you can actually select an IVR. So let's say, for example, I am going to choose one of our IVRs here, and I'm going to choose this IVR, and I'm going to exclude internal calls, no keypad were selected, calls that did not last over 10 seconds, outside of working hours. So these are some filters that you can actually apply on your day-to-day basis. And I'm going to click on search. So here, this is actually the service level that we have, but you see that it's actually changed. So what's changed? Here, you still have the service level. You have the total calls and the duration, but you can see here that there are some new tabs. You have the waiting time on the IVR. So on average, people have waited 22 seconds. The maximum this week were over 1 minute. The average communication duration was 6 minutes and 22 seconds. The average communication duration out here, of course, there were any since no outbound calls were made. And then the abandon time is over 1 minute. What is the abandon time? The abandon time is actually while I wait, and if I don't have anyone over the phone, I'm just going to hang up. So here, customers have actually, people have actually hung up around 1 minute and 53 seconds. And then here, on the IVR, because I filter over the IVR, I have the missed calls by different section. So here, you would have the outside of working hours, hang up before ringing, no keypad option selected, and no answers. So you have 2 missed calls. And again, if I click here on the missed calls, I will actually be prompted to the logs page to the missed calls that you would have here. Let's move back to the analytics page. So here you have the missed calls, and then you still have the call processing status in terms of missed calls, and then the processed calls by channel. And then again, you would have the average processing time. As we move down, you see you will still have the history in terms of total calls, service level, call duration, unique callers, and so on and so forth. You have the heat map as well. For example, here, if I filter on missed calls, there was 1 missed call on Monday between 4 to 5 p.m. So here you can really monitor your activity on your IVR. And what's changed here? So here you can see that there is actually a leaderboard. So the leaderboard are with people that are actually assigned to your IVR. So you can see here you would have several options. You would have the out, too late. So we are going to review all of them. So here actually out is the outgoing call made by the user. Answered is the call answered by the user who picked up the call. Too late, it actually means that the user tried to pick up, but too late. It was another user who picked up the call a little before him or her, and this status shows actually the good intention of the person who tried to pick up. But of course, this has to work if the call is actually ringing simultaneously to both users. If it's a random order or predefined order, it won't work. It has to be ringing simultaneously. Then call answered. Call answered, it's actually another user who took the call and the user did not try to pick up at all. No answer means that it's actually a missed call for everyone and no agent took the call. Rejected. Rejected means that the call was actually refused, rejected by an agent by pressing the red button. Snooze, it's actually your unavailability status. For example, if you're on a break, in a meeting, on holiday, and the call was received while the agent had activated the snooze. Planning, it actually means that a call was received while the agent was outside of his working hours. In call actually means that the agent was already on call when the call was received, and not connected simply means that it's a missed call and it was received while the agent was disconnected. And I'm going to move up to this part. And if you click here into the plus button, you actually have the ability, and let me actually show you quickly if I choose another IVR here. But here, if I just click on this IVR and I click on search over this week, and if I click on the plus, then you would actually have your IVR that would look like this. And let me move. So here, so for example, here, if you check, then you would have this amount of calls, and you would be able to see, for example, here that 417 calls went to the redirection 1, and 98 went to the second redirection, and so on and so forth. So you can actually see how many calls actually came into Ringover, for example, or into your company, and you will be able to refine that search. You can refine that search here again, as we saw on the here on the service level, the call duration, and so on and so forth, and the processing status, and the heat map. So you would have all this ability. But let me just check. So let me show you, for example, if I just want to check, for example, here, this specific redirection here, and I can actually click here and click on refine search, and I will be able to see that specific redirection where it rank. So Ringover gives you really a lot of options where you can really define based on your business and your strategy. And one tip that I would like to give you as well is whenever you are actually making a search, for example, here I choose this line and I click on search. Whenever you are making another search, what I'm recommending is always reset your filters before making another search. So let me move back to slides. So here, I'm already going to launch another survey. So based actually on your indicators here, so which of the following indicators do you actually find the most useful for your business? Is it the global service level, the missed call handling rate, the service level by user, or the heat map? Like we just saw, the call per hour. And I will let you answer. So we have one user who actually wrote service level by user, global service level, we have 1 person, missed call handling rate 1. I will just show you one thing that you would be able to see as well in terms of the analytics. And let me actually show you. In terms of the analytics, once you actually filter, and let me show you on the call analytics, once you actually filter over a user, you would actually be able to see the SLA by user. So here, for example, if I again select on the personalize and I choose, for example, this IVR, and I click on search, here you have the service level. You would have the service level here in terms of the leaderboard. So you have the data, the average communication duration, and the service level. So you are actually able to track that when you are filtering over an IVR. And let me move on. Perfect. Do you have any questions for this webinar? Again, if you have any questions or if you have any issues, I am putting down here our details of our support, so you can connect with support@ringover.com, but you can also call our direct line here, which is our support line. One thing that I will also show you is that if you ever need to contact our support team, you can also use here the contact us form. So you can click here, click on contact us, and you will be prompted to this page, and then you can click on contact support team, and then you'll be prompted to this page, which is where you can submit a request to contact our support team. Do you have any questions? No questions? Perfect. You will receive a survey at the end of this webinar, so please feel free to give us your input. And also, if there are more topics that you would like us to see and to present to you, we'll be more than happy to have your feedback as well, since we are really taking at heart your feedbacks. Thank you so much for attending this webinar. Thank you, Aurélie, for answering the questions. And I wish you all a very lovely day.